Gilligan Island star today. Gilligan's Island debuted in the 1960s as part of the shifting environment of the television comedy, which had been introduced a few years before. It prompts the question, what's the cast up to these days? Though some have since passed away, many others have gone on to have successful careers, frequently serving as the distinguishing trait of our favorite characters. We haven't visited the island in person in a long time, but here's your opportunity to relive your favorite moments from the show, while also knowing where the beloved actors are now. Bob Denver as Gilligan, then. As the show's title character, it may have come as a surprise that Gilligan was far from in command while on the island. He may have been granted a lot of responsibility while working on the ship, but once the ship became stuck, all bets were off. Gilligan often claimed a childlike innocence, which both benefited from his humor but could also be a disadvantage. In any case, the other castaways couldn't help but admire him. Bob Denver now. Long before his role as Gilligan, Bob Denver rose to prominence in The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, which thrust him into the limelight for the first time. Denver went on to star in shows like The Good Guys and Dusty's Trail after Gilligan's finale. Denver's career was already starting to fade after so many years in the limelight, even before he retired in 1997. Denver died from pneumonia in 2005. Don Rickles as Norbert Wiley, then. Prisoners on the run were not the only thorny characters the castaways met during their stay on the island. When Norbert Wiley came ashore in Season 3 and promptly managed to seize the company, he threw the gang for a loop. Wiley reasoned that with a rich guy like Thurston Howell III around, he'd be able to get a fair ransom. Instead, he discovered that the castaways had flipped the script, making Wiley the prisoner. Don Rickles now. Don Rickles is today considered a legend, but when he appeared on Gilligan's Island in the early 1960s, he was still relatively unknown. Rickles' big break had come just a few years ago. However, he rose to prominence with Kelly's Heroes less than a decade later. Younger viewers, on the other hand, will remember Rickles as the voice of Mr. Potato Head from the Toy Story franchise. Kurt Russell as Jungle Boy, then. When you're stuck on a desert island, it's natural to think that the only people on the island are your bunch, so when a young Kurt Russell appeared in the jungle, Gilligan and the others were taken aback. The program never explained where he came from or how he got there, but for a short moment it seemed that Jungle Boy would be the key to their escape. Kurt Russell now. Kurt Russell's career has lasted the greater part of his life, starting as a minor TV star and progressing to become a true A-lister. Russell's been a continuous presence in many Hollywood movies since his role as Jungle Boy on Gilligan's Island. His most recent performances include the blockbusters Guardians of the Galaxy 2, The Hateful Eight, and The Fate of the Furious. Russell, on the other hand, shows no signs of slowing down. Michael Forrest as Yagundi, then. Similar to Jungle Boy, Gilligan would discover after the series that the island contained a local population that had managed to avoid the castaways. Gilligan found himself in a pickle after saving a lady from drowning, only to have her ex show up and challenge him to battle. Yagundi fully anticipated to upset Gilligan, but Gilligan triumphed. Michael Forrest now. Michael Forrest may have only featured in one episode of Gilligan's Island, but his career did not suffer as a result. Forrest was a frequent voice actor when it came to creating the soundtrack to famous video games for many years, making his voice even more known than his looks. In recent years, he's done English dubbing for the film Eureka 7 Hi-Fi Evolution 1 and appeared as himself in Unbelievable. Larry Storch as Jackson Farrell, then. To the criminal Jackson Farrell, hiding away aboard a touring boat sounded like a fantastic idea at a time period when it was much simpler to slip off the radar. Farrell had managed to evade the authorities after a string of West Coast bank robberies by fleeing to Hawaii. At first, the other castaways were persuaded by his narrative that he was a doctor. When they discovered his secret, he attempted to jail the others. Larry Storch now. Larry Storch may not have been the most popular cast member on Gilligan's Island, but his presence was unforgettable. Even if spectators were unfamiliar with Storch's performance on the program, he was such a well-known character actor from prior TV and film ventures that they were likely able to identify him. In his pomp, he was a voiceover regular for the Pink Panther show and Scooby-Doo, but his final appearance was in medium rare in 2010. Alan Hale as Jonas Grumby, then. Jonas Grumby, better known to audiences as Skipper, was the captain of the lost ship before they were abandoned on a desolate island in the middle of the Pacific. Despite how determined Grumby was to deliver the ship and its passengers to safety, he was unable to complete his mission. Nonetheless, Skipper understood when he needed to take command, even on the island, to ensure everyone's survival. Alan Hale Jr. now. Despite how natural Alan Hale Jr. made it appear, playing Skipper was not an easy position. Born into a film family, Hale was destined for a successful acting career from an early age, as seen by the quantity of prestige credits on his record. Following Gilligan, Hale would feature in shows ranging from Growing Pains to Magnum P.I. Hale died in 1990 after a long and successful career. Tina Louise as Ginger Grant, then. Ginger had just been thinking about resting in the warm tropical seas when she boarded the boat excursion that would leave her trapped with the others. Though it wasn't easy for her mind, she made the most of her time on the island, often becoming the one who raised the morale of the others when they needed it. They certainly needed Ginger's cheerfulness while they were lost. Tina Louise now. Tina Louise hasn't been seen much since the end of Gilligan's Island, making her few appearances all the more memorable. Louise, on the other hand, spent 2 decades on some of the most famous TV series of the time, including The Love Boat, Chips, Dallas, and Love American Style. Tina Louise had just emerged from the shadows in the feature film Tapestry. Actors Stephen Baldwin and Burt Young appeared beside her. Russell Johnson as the Professor, then. While the Professor wasn't technically a professor, the other castaways thought his experience as a high school science instructor was sufficient. The Professor, with his extensive understanding of plants, always appeared to be the most probable option for finding out how to go home. Despite being able to make tools out of nearly any material he could find, he appeared to have a huge blind spot when it came to ship maintenance. Russell Johnson now. Russell Johnson's casting on Gilligan's Island looked like a dream come true, until he continued to be typecast in parts similar to the Professor. Despite the little setback, Johnson was adamant about establishing a great acting career. Later in his career, Johnson landed recurring appearances on shows such as Dynasty, Beyond Westworld, and The Jeffersons. Johnson died in 2014 after battling renal illness. Zsa Zsa Gabor as Erica Tiffany Smith, then. Erica Tiffany Smith, the heiress, seemed to be the castaways' rescuer for a short point in time. In her desire to develop a new resort, she came across the desolate island. Unfortunately, she made a critical misstep when it came to helping the trapped people. Instead of providing the U.S. Navy with the island's location, she ended up abandoning the group with no method of finding them. Zsa Zsa Gabor now. Zsa Zsa Gabor's acting career may not have been well known, but she had little problem keeping her name in the news. If it wasn't her 9 marriages, it was something else, even though she supplemented her socialite status with a steady stream of acting assignments. Gabor's lengthy career included appearances in famous sitcoms such as Facts of Life, Batman, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She died just before turning 100. Jim Backus as Thurston Howell III, then. With a name like Thurston Howell III, it was impossible to mistake him for a rustic bumpkin. Despite his enormous fortune, Thurston's money could not get the castaways off the island. Thurston was forced to confront the truth that he'd always relied on money to solve his issues when stuck in the middle of the ocean. Thurston, on the other hand, had standing among the rest of the gang. Jim Backus now. Jim Backus, like many of his fellow cast members, was not only a skilled actor but also a well-known vocal artist who brought to life many of our favorite cartoon characters. While many people didn't realize it, Backus's most well-known voiceover role was that of Mr. Magoo, whom he performed in both cinema and television. Backus reprised his character in the Gilligan spin-offs and films, making Thurston one of his last appearances before he died in 1989. Natalie Schafer as Lovey Howell, then. Thurston's wife, Lovey Howell, was just as dependent on her riches as her husband until they were trapped on the island. Even though she treasured her worldly belongings, she demonstrated adaptability despite all circumstances. She was linked to her high-class existence, but she also managed to stir things up on the island by becoming a regular source of humor. Lovey was able to reconcile her old and new lives in some way. Natalie Schafer now. Natalie Schafer was chosen in the part of Lovey Howell because she exudes natural grace. In reality, Schafer has done numerous similar parts before her employment on Gilligan's Island. Natalie Schafer, who played Lovey Howell on Gilligan's Island, would return for all her spin-offs and TV movies that followed her over the next several decades. Schafer made her last film appearance in I'm Dangerous Tonight, a year before she died in 1991. Dawn Wells as Mary Ann Summers, then. Mary Ann Summers, the castaway who managed to keep the gang together throughout their stay on the island, always had a grin on her face. Summers was in charge of the everyday tasks on the island, whether it was cleaning or cooking. Everyone realized how worthless they would have been if she hadn't been there to help them with the resources they had. As a result, everyone adored Mary Ann. Dawn Wells now. Dawn Wells' career took off when she appeared on Gilligan's Island, and she was busy with acting assignments through the 1960s. Dawn's jobs grew increasingly scarce over the following 3 decades. However, she did make many cameos on Roseanne and Elf. Dawn's finances have suffered in recent years, prompting a fan-run GoFundMe website to assist with her expenditures. Nonetheless, she continues to promote Gilligan's Island repeats.